Thank you for joining us today. I'm James Gore. I apologize that my video is not on. I don't have a good connection. I'm County Supervisor for District 4, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Before we get started, brief message for our Spanish-speaking viewers that I'll go into right now. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la sesión informativa. Esta reunión es sobre un sitio de vivienda de emergencia en el Centro de Administración del Condado de Santa Rosa, la ciudad de Santa Rosa, el Condado de Sonoma. Si están participando por Zoom y quiere escuchar la presentación en español, busque o oprima el globo que indica interpretación y seleccione el idioma español. Muchas gracias. Continuing, just for everybody, thank you for your patience. It's been about 2 months since the County of Sonoma opened our emergency shelter site at the Government Center campus. We have 70 individuals currently calling this location home. This is the 5th of the webinars that we've hosted to keep neighbors updated on the status of our operations. And I want to thank you for joining us at previous iterations and also today. We want to make sure that you have a status of the operations of the shelter and answer any questions you may have. During our last webinar, we had not as much input as the previous few, so we want to make sure also that the process is working right, that the emails folks are sending in, the pictures, the calls are being responded to. And I want to thank our staff for being diligent on that. As we've done with our previous meetings like this, today's webinar is recorded, posted on the county's Homeless Services Division website for future reference. On the website, there's also a list of frequently asked questions, facts about the emergency shelter sites, in addition to recordings of the last few webinars. I'm happy to be joined today by my colleague, Supervisor Chris Gore, Chair of the Board of Supervisors, Dave Kiff, our Director of the Homelessness Services Division in our Department of Health Services. Dave will be providing an update on the site. We also have Tina Rivera, the Director of the Department of Health Services, who will be able to answer any questions about services provided on the site and the leadership of the overall initiative. And Matt Lilligren from the County Council's office is also with us today to help answer questions. First, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Chair Coursey.
Thanks, James. I'll make this short. I just want to say happy to be here. I see a couple new names from that we haven't seen in these meetings before. Hope that word is getting around a little better these days. Want to thank people who've donated to the shelter. We've received food, books, clothing, everyday essentials. People at the shelter really appreciate it. As Supervisor Gore mentioned, it's been 2 months since the shelter opened, and to me, it's a success in that the individuals who are there have a roof, place to sleep, food to eat, and they are safe. They're also receiving services every day that they were not able to access in their previous situations. So I'll stop there, throw it back to Supervisor Gore. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chair Coursey. I appreciate that. As much as I facilitate, I'm going to ask our next few speakers to move directly through their presentations. So just to mention real quickly that if you've joined us on Zoom, you'd like to pose a question for any of the panelists or make a comment today, please feel free to raise your hand and we will call on you. We also want to invite you to post your question in the Q&A box, the question and answer box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or at the top if you have a different desktop as opposed to a tablet. And also, if you're invited, you're always invited to, as I mentioned before, and requested to, if anything comes up, is to email questions and comments to temporary shelters at sonoma-county.org. That's temporary shelters, one word, at sonoma-county.org. We're going to be taking a few questions and comments from the public in a few minutes. What I'd like to do first, though, is ask Dave Kiv to give an update on the site, and Dave to go directly into Tina Rivera, who's going to be ready to give any follow-up you'd like. And then Paul Gullickson, I'd like you to just go directly into your point about when you remind everybody about the Zoom, also kind of get started on the questions. I don't need to facilitate the next three folks presenting, especially with a bad connection. So Dave, passing it over to you.
Thank you, Supervisor. And as noted, I'm here with my colleagues, my Supervisor, Tina Rivera, and James Alexander. James and I work most directly at the site. And James does a lot of the coordination of the intake there. We also have in our audience group a couple of our good representatives from DEMA. They're our service provider. We rely heavily on DEMA to manage the site well, and to provide a lot of the case management that the residents are receiving. And that's the good news. These are now 77 people who are being provided with intensive case management services to help them get through what can be years, if not decades, of chronic homelessness. I think that's something that's been clear to us all, is the people who came from the trail and who are now residing at the site are folks who have resisted shelter for a long time for many reasons, and we try to approach them with compassion and in a trauma-informed way. For the neighbors, I know I'm out there a lot. James is out there a lot. I have seen an uptick in people visiting the creek, visiting the park, some of them not behaving well. I've been working closely with the DEMA team as the service providers, because the clients do have to sign good neighbor codes of conduct that encourage them to be good neighbors. And our DEMA team has been good about reinforcing that on a case-by-case basis. But I just wanted to let you know that, again, we do observe that. We're there a lot. I was there last Friday, and there was a gentleman closer to Mendocino Avenue. I don't even think he was with the encampment, but he was screaming up a storm, standing there in his socks at the street. And it just brought home to me the care that this person needed. He was responded to by the in-response team, the Santa Rosa team, but also that this kind of behavior is impactful if you live nearby. And it stopped after a while, but it was a long while. And I just wanted you to know that we see that, and we work closely with DEMA to try and mitigate those kinds of issues when they pop up. I'll stop there, welcome questions, and see if James wanted to chime in anything about that I didn't cover, or Tina.
Thanks, Dave. I think you covered it very well from my standpoint.
And I have nothing further to add either.
Okay, well, let's dive in and address the questions. Thank you all for being here, and those who are joining us, who have joined us on the Zoom itself. Just as a reminder, as Supervisor Gore mentioned, if you are on Zoom and have a question or a comment, please just raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can ask it in person. You're also welcome to post your question in the Q&A box, and we'll address that to the panelists. And finally, if you are joining us via our streamed broadcast on our county's Facebook page, you're welcome to post a question in the comments area, and we will share those with the panelists as well. So let's start with one that we got earlier, and that was to Dave or to any of you. concerns that there seems to be an individual who's spending a lot of time in the creek. And there's one of the neighbors is concerned about, one or more of the neighbors is concerned about that. And the question is is there anything that can be done about that?
So
And-
I appreciate the question. I'm not sure if the question is specifically literally a person in the creek. I have heard that. It's actually against the Santa Rosa Municipal Code and the Fish and Game Code to be able to do that. So I did have a conversation with both with DEMA and with the Santa Rosa Police Department, and they stressed again that that's not appropriate behavior for a couple of different reasons. And I know DEMA is aware of that and has brought it up at town hall meetings. So that is if you're literally standing in the creek. And certainly everybody does have a right to walk through the park, to sit at the bench. They don't have a right to do illegal behavior there. They are supposed to pick up their trash. They're not supposed to block a walkway. And these are all kinds of discussions we've had with the DEMA team. Again, DEMA is in charge of the interior of the site, but and that's their focal point. But they do have conversations in town halls that have gotten strong and aggressive about behaviors that folks might conduct themselves with when they leave the site. So again, we're aware of it. DEMA is aware of it, and we're trying to work hard to make sure that it's not going to be a problem. I do know that as the weather gets warmer, the creek's going to dry up too. But there's people who are living in the parking lot do see the shaded area as a nice, cool shaded area, and I'm glad that they do. Again, their behaviors though should be akin to anyone else walking through the park or sitting on the bench, and that's what we try to stress.
I think that I just want to acknowledge that we are seeing the street outside my window here has become a more frequented thoroughfare for homeless individuals or people who look like they may be homeless. It's a public street. We can't keep people from doing that, but I think that it's fair to say that the presence of the shelter has added some people transversing, going through the neighborhood, our neighborhood and some of your neighborhood. They have a right to do that, but they don't have a right, as Dave said, to be doing illegal activities. If you see somebody who seems to be in distress, like the fellow that Dave mentioned, just yelling or screaming out there, or you see somebody who is doing something illegal, it's appropriate to call 911. It's also appropriate to call the in-response team, although 911 will dispatch in response as well, and that's the non-police response. It's a social worker, it's a paramedic, it's outreach workers. But when you call, they will ask if this is a person who looks dangerous or armed, or if there's any violence going on, those type of things. And we can put up the non-emergency police number and the in response non-911 number before we're done here, so you have those.
I'd add one more thing. Supervisor Coursey made me think of it as in the creek and transiting up to Myers Drive. I have had two conversations with the city of Santa Rosa about potentially putting up a couple of panels of chain link fence there. I hate chain link fence, but if it keeps people from doing what they shouldn't do, which is climb up that very steep area and to get either down or into or the creek or up onto Myers Drive. I just haven't heard back yet from the fire department. The fire marshal was going to check into that for me to see what kind of permit I needed. But I do have authorization to set that up once I know that. So I think one or two of the neighbors had asked me about that.
Okay, Amy sent in this question. She says, I live adjacent to Steel Lane Park. While the nearby shelter addressed the Joe Rodota Trail, how are you being proactive to address the homeless issue in and around this neighborhood and Steel Lane Park, the vehicle camping at the park and the individual camping in the park.
So those are in Santa Rosa proper. And I say that respectfully, not dismissively. And Santa Rosa has a great homelessness response group that would address that with you. And hopefully we can put that in the chat if you're not aware of it, or in the Q&A, but it's a great thing to contact the city of Santa Rosa's team about.
Okay, Alicia Roman has raised her hand, and I'm going to go to Alicia. Alicia? You should be able to talk. Yeah.
Hi, Alicia Roman.
Yep.
That doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's what the name came up. Maybe Alicia sent you the link. Anyway, do you have a question? Do you want to give your name and have a question?
So, yeah, my name's Michael Tatone. I was shared this link, so I was not. This is not Alicia or her phone, but
Okay.
I wanted to ask just how many caseworkers are on site per capita? Because I have spoken to some folks who seem to feel like they don't really see their caseworker very often. I'm also wondering, I've heard that folks aren't allowed to be within 1 mile of the encampment if they're outside the encampment. And I wanted to verify if that's true. And if so, are residents supposed to go like to a grocery store that's more than 1 mile away? I've heard that that there's this kind of like, you know, there relatively stringent search requirements in certain ways, like people are required to take off their shoes. Sometimes I've heard that the soles of their shoes are removed to see what's under the soles. But then there's like, you know, there's obviously other ways that people can get things into the site that they're not going to be searching through. So I'm wondering, just like, has there been any discussion about amending the rules for the search requirements on site?
I can address part of that, and then James, if you want to address some, and I know some folks from DEMA are in the attendees panel. There hasn't been any discussion that I'm aware of amending the search procedures. That's to answer your direct question. I think there's a couple other questions about some of the things that DEMA has tried to do to protect the good neighbor policies.
Yeah, so thank you. And thank you, Michael. So just to clarify, we have 2 case managers and 4 housing navigators on site at the emergency shelter site. And we also have case managers that visit the site on a daily basis. So yeah, there's a meeting once a week also with all the case managers and housing navigators. So we have ample staff on site. So I don't know if you're getting information that there's not, but there are. So that's to clarify that point. The second point, no people are being told that they have to be 1 mile away from the site. I don't know where that came from, but that isn't true. You know, they're citizens. They're guests of the site, but they're citizens. So they have to walk to and from. Does that answer your question, Michael?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, was there another? Okay, we have a couple of questions that were mailed in, and both of them again have to do primarily with one has to do with, again, about Steel Lane Park. And Michelle notes that precedent was set during the COVID pandemic and Steel Lane Park was closed to traffic. No cars were allowed entry and the homeless population fled due to lack of traffic and support for the drug dealing in the parking lot. I urge you to consider my request to close Steel Lane Park from sundown to sunup and install a gate that bars cars from parking overnight. This would help to improve the safety of our community and protect our environment.
I'll lean in. Oh, unless you do, Corey. I
No, go
was
ahead.
just going to say, we'll probably say the same thing, which is I totally hear and acknowledge your concern and those protocols. The difficulty is that you're speaking to us as the county of Sonoma as if we're the government with jurisdiction over the area. We're actually more of a, in this sense, more of a tenant, more of we have land within the city's jurisdiction where we are placing this site. So we also have to play by the rules of the city. The city manages the park. The city manages the homeless encampments within the city. That's why we have a good neighbor policy, which means we not only work hard to manage our impacts, but we work with the city of Santa Rosa and the PD and others. If they need to respond, we cannot have sheriff respond in this area. So just, once again, as Dave said before, is not dismissive, but with acknowledgement and respect is that has to be something that goes to the city council and to their policy. I'll just further say that, the tough thing about looking at the COVID policies was that there was nationwide, pretty much a dictate out of the CDC not to move encampments. And we all know to not increase the spread of COVID. And so it is a different situation, and Santa Rosa, along with other cities and us as a county, are moving on anti-camping ordinances. So I'd go back to what Dave said, which is if we have the information in the chat, which is how to get in touch with the homeless outreach team and others, that's one thing. But if you want to get into park management that is definitely a city issue. Chris, is that good enough, or you got anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Councilwoman Victoria Fleming, Santa Rosa Councilwoman, has been to most of these meetings. I neglected to tell her about this meeting, so I'm not sure if she had the information or if she just can't come tonight. But I will pass on that request about the closure of the park. It's a city issue, so she would be a good contact person for the person who asked the question too. But regardless, I'll pass that on to her.
Okay, and then we have another question which is similar, but this is from Tamara and Eric, who are homeowners in the area directly behind the old Redwood Credit Union drive-up window. They say, we hear loud voices yelling, barking dogs that continue well past the quiet hours every night. We regularly have homeless individuals talking, yelling, and heckling us through our fence. So she goes on to say, would the county consider the following request? Build a fence at the end of Myers Drive bordering Pollen Creek. 2, bring back regular security drive-bys and patrols for the area. And 3, consider reimbursement of fences that the residents need to build to feel safe in their own homes.
I think Dave mentioned earlier, and maybe you missed it, Tamara and Eric, but he's working with the fire department and the city permitting department on a fence solution for the end of Myers Drive. The last one, and I can't remember the middle one, but the last one was, can we reinstate patrols in that area? That's something that we would need to talk about as with staff and probably with the board too. I'm just not sure what the cost of that would be. And I don't know what the previous situation was because I came in the middle of COVID, so I don't know what was going on before then. But it's certainly something that I can look into.
The third request had to do with consider reimbursement of any fences that the residents need to build to address this situation. So, anybody? Go ahead.
That's another question that needs to be discussed with staff. But I'd like to just point out that this is a temporary situation. I don't know that, well, I would hope that any additional fences, I think there's fences pretty much along the whole corridor, except for Myers Drive. I would hope that nobody was putting in a permanent fence for a temporary issue.
Okay. Again, we want to remind any of our those who are joined us on Zoom that if they have a question or a comment, feel free to raise your hand and I can call on you to make sure that you have that time for the panelists. Let me go to another question that was sent to us in advance or sent to us over email. Jane says, a few years ago, a medical doctor friend told me that many of our homeless come from people coming for treatment at a local methadone clinic and staying after treatment. Do you know anything about this? Maybe Dave or James, you could address that.
Yeah, maybe James can add further. That certainly hasn't been our experience, at least with these individuals. Remember, a significant majority of these individuals came over from the encampments on the Joe Rodota Trail, which is south of Highway 12 there. We don't do admissions, walk-up admissions, and every admission has to be with a referral from James's own team, and they're usually people, again, who are part of an established encampment that we already have some type of service provision relationship with.
That's totally correct, Dave. And I have no information regarding a methadone clinic and people coming from a methadone clinic at all.
I also just want to state that we continue to get concerns, and I would say I appreciate all of it, but anecdotal statements about folks coming here because of services and staying, or on the other side, people being shipped here from other jurisdictions. We have never found any of that to be corroborated or to have fact based on it outside of rumor. And quite the contrary, as Dave kind of mentioned in our annual homeless count also, is it's consistent that upwards of 80+% of our individuals have been here for more than 10 years. I think it's very difficult for some people to realize, but the reality is that our homeless situation is our homeless situation, and the solutions have to be here. There's nowhere that we can, although folks don't like, everybody's concerned about when we create new solutions that are interim housing, emergency housing, permanent supportive housing, is I think I just want to state very clearly that, from my perspective, and when our board has really addressed this issue, is that we can't come in and make this issue disappear. The solutions do have to be in community. We know that impacts you all, neighbors, residents. We know it impacts us. That's why we've chosen to take accountability and put this on our government site. But I just want to state that this is our issue, and that's why we're dealing with it in our community.
I would like to add that we did have some good news that we put out today related to our latest point in time count. And that showed this year we were down, our overall, we were down 22% in our area's homeless population, including a 24% decline in those identified as chronically homeless. So that certainly is trending in the right direction. I'll just throw that out. Sonia asks, have you heard from businesses around the county center about how the new encampment is working out for them?
James or Tina can correct me, but I haven't heard from any businesses. I've heard from just a couple of folks, importantly, there on Myers. Some are at the session here today, but those are the folks I've heard from. I have heard from a couple of a good handful of county employees who have a specific question or a concern, especially in the early days when some in the homeless community assumed that they could self-check in. So there were more people hanging around who were told at the gate, hey, you can't get in this way. You have to be referred in from an encampment with James's team. So, but that has largely gone away. But I haven't heard specifically from any businesses.
Dave, you should explain what James's team is.
Sure. I'll let James explain his team.
Okay.
He's good at
Yeah,
that,
thank
yeah.
you. Thank you, Chairman. So we're part of the Homeless Encampment Assistance and Resource Team. So we're called the HEART Team. And we actually respond to encampments throughout the county, the entire county. So we send teams out to encampments to find individuals, engage with the individuals, and outreach towards services. So that's basically what we do, and it's a daily job, and it continues. And we were grateful for the capacity that was added to our sheltering ability with the emergency shelter site. That's for certain. Thank you.
So, and just to reiterate, this is not you can't come up to the shelter and knock on the gate and be invited in for a place in a tent. This is, it's a regulated entry system that focuses on vulnerable people who are in existing encampments around the county.
And
Exactly. Thank you.
largely known to us, which helps with our ability to make sure that they would be a good fit for the encampment. So and then we can follow up, as James noted, with James's own team is in the encampment with DEMA and their assistance, and so we're leveraging the two team skills to provide more intensive case management than would otherwise be provided.
Can someone talk about what advice DEMA staff is giving to people who do show up looking for shelter there?
Well, you'd be met at the gate actually by the D Block staff. Remember, D Block is the security team. They're on 24/7, and they would be the ones who generally would tell people to find another path. This is not their place for housing. And the two DEMA reps who are in attendees, I don't know if Monica or Micah will tell anything differently, that if there's any kind of interaction from folks that come in, but usually they're met by the D Block staff.
I'm just wondering if the security folks provide any kind of resources, like you can call this number or go, to this spot for what you need.
Let's see. Monica raised her hand in the attendees. Monica might be able to answer that question.
Okay,
Monica's one of the site administrators.
Okay, Monica?
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, Monica.
Hello. So when somebody comes up to the gates, we give them the homeless hotline phone number. And we tell them that they call that phone number, and I think that goes to James's team. Yeah. So we don't let just anybody come into the program. We make sure that they leave with the phone number, and yeah.
Okay, so they do get some advice about an
Yes.
alternative place, but
Yes.
they're not invited in.
Yeah, they're not. And there's other shelters also. So we just remind them, you might want to check with the other shelters that are around.
Okay.
So.
And I know for, the neighbors, this doesn't allay the concerns that people come here and then are left on the outside. But it's the way that we're working, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Yep.
And I also wanted Tamara to know that I got the note about Allied Security, and I will look into that.
Great, thank you. Michelle also has a question or comment. Michelle, you want to go ahead?
Yes, hello. Thank you. I'm gonna.
Yeah, you got some feedback. Yeah, there you go.
Gonna navigate that. Thank you.
You might have it on a recording on the back. If you could turn off there you go.
We've got multiple computers here. Thank you,
That's good.
Paul. And first of all, I'd like to say thanks to James, Chris, and Dave. This is a very difficult conversation to have at a community level. I am a resident of the Myers Drive neighborhood. I spend lots of time in Steel Lane Park, in around adjacent neighborhoods. And this is a very difficult It's a difficult subject here. All the neighbors over here talk about it. One thing I would like to say is kudos to Dave Kiff and James. I believe that there was a deep concern about the encampment or the shelter as it was being constructed. But y'all have done a wonderful job of organizing. And I'm actually, as a neighbor to the shelter, learning a lot of new facts and very enlivening facts here tonight. I think that where as a community member and an adjacent neighborhood member, the concern comes in is in community disconnect. So what I have for myself and what my neighbors are experiencing is a large disconnect in communication from all of the service populations. We know that DEMA is sponsoring the homeless shelter and place. We know that there's a city and a county organization there, but I don't know who to call when I have a problem. We've seen increased spotlighting. The front page of the Press Democrat this last weekend had our Steel Lane Park on spotlight. We have increased homelessness, traffic there. But one of the major problems as a resident, a lifelong resident of Sonoma County, I was actually born and raised here, is that there's a disconnect between the service providers here. And I think that Dave spoke into it a little bit earlier when he said, well, it's, Steel Lane Park's not a county property, it's a city property. But who do the neighbors call when we're faced with problems? We have been calling the police as far as straight homeless and drug problems, needle use in the park, overnight drug dealing things there. Who should we call, and how can you all provide us as citizens a more clear-cut pathway to getting to the parties that we need to be talking with to help us resolve our issues? It's an open question. Thank you all.
I think the answer that I would give here, Michelle, is call the same people you would call before the shelter was opened. If there's stuff going on in your neighborhood that involves criminal activity or people who are in distress, it's appropriate to call the city Santa Rosa Police Department. That it is difficult. It's difficult figuring out all the jurisdictions. I don't expect anybody to understand that. It's hard enough for us to keep it straight. But the shelter is the county's responsibility. Outside the shelter, it's actually the city's responsibility. And I know that we're talking about this because of the shelter that was created by the county, by us. And I want to take as much responsibility for that as we possibly can. But Steel Lane Park is not our responsibility. It's not our purview.
They're out.
As much as I would like to fix whatever problems are happening over there, that's the city. And again, sorry that we don't have the councilwoman here. And I think that, for our next meeting, we also should, Paul and Dave, we should make every effort to get a representative of the Santa Rosa Police Department in the next meeting we do like this.
That's a good idea. We'll definitely follow up on that.
I'm putting something in the chat too for Michelle. It'd be really important for you to get to know, and I'd be happy to make this introduction, Sasha Cohen and Kelly Kuykendall with the Santa Rosa City staff. They are committed, hardworking, problem-solving staff members who just work on the homeless issue in neighborhoods. And I'd be happy to make sure you get to know them, because those are folks to talk to as well.
Okay, one question. Could we reiterate what when we say that it's a temporary site, could you reiterate what the timeline and plan moving forward is for the emergency shelter site?
So it's a great question. we're 2 months into operations, and the Santa Rosa Fire Department, and as Supervisor Coursey mentioned, this is a temporary site. We take that seriously. We're on a parking lot. It's not a place for permanent habitation. We have a 6-month permit with the City of Santa Rosa Fire Department, and that involves their ability to permit tents as habitable structures. They believe they can only do that for 180 days. We have been working, in addition to trying to manage the camp well, we've been trying to work on what's next, because not everybody, not even a majority of the people, will find housing by the time September 23rd rolls around. But we're going to have to try and find what's the next location. Is it a different type? Is it a different type of activity too? It could be pallet shelters combined with a more traditional indoor non-congregate setting. That's something that Tina has talked about a lot, that may help people further in their journey versus just living in a tent and then getting ready for housing. So we've got about 10 different locations we're looking at. We're going to be talking with the Board of Supervisors about that relatively soon. The board has a busy agenda, and this is one topic on it.
You know, I want to add one thing to that, Dave, and all is that, so this was designed to be a temporary, and as Dave said, and all these things, and this is a policy direction and others, but I just want to let folks know that this government county complex, the reason that we have come here and that we've worked on others is because there aren't many places, and people, by and large, even in the private sector, because of liabilities and other things, are not always stepping up with locations. Every location that we look at always has something that needs to be managed, and we acknowledge that. But I can't commit that we will not have homeless services on this campus in the future. This has to be looked at as a place that we could do that. There are no plans right now to do that, but I'm just letting folks know that it's the only way responsible as government. We have the accountability on us that we cannot move people off of public land unless we provide opportunities for them to get into housing. So for us to do that, we have to keep this and other options on the table. So while that might not be the best news to some folks who hope that this snaps and it goes away and it goes to some other site where there's another neighborhood that has issues and we have these same kind of things, I stress, I talk about this because I have a homeless solution that we have helped manage that's just down the street from me. And it's definitely something that impacts me, and it's definitely something that I work with the city of Hillsburg and others on, but it's also a part of my life now here in Sonoma County. It's part of the reality. So I just, I have to be real with folks. So really want to thank us. Paul, do we have any others?
Let me just, there's a couple of comments I'd like to share. They're not questions, just comments. One from neighbors. Sonia says, we had to permanently close the end of our street because of homeless individuals in our neighborhood. It has improved the situation significantly, although not entirely. So whether this encampment is temporary or not, fencing is sometimes the only solution, I'm sorry to say. And Tamara says, this isn't about not having temporary housing. This is about caring for the permanent residents as well. Please understand, we understand the need, but we deserve to be taken care of too. We are not saying to move the encampment, just do good business. And with that, actually, Tamara has raised her hand, and I'm going to call on her. Tamara, do you have a final question or comment?
Thank you so much. I know that I've been kind of driving you guys crazy with questions. I was late to the party because we weren't aware of these meetings. So thank you for making the time. Supervisor Gore, I just need you to hear us. This is not about us saying, someone else needs to deal with this. We're saying, let's deal with this together.
Yeah.
We're citizens. We live here. We care for our
100%.
local citizens. We're not those people. We need you guys to help us feel safe in our own homes, as well as these folks that are unhoused.
I honor what you're saying. And I think everybody on this call, it's beautiful to hear you speak right now, because that's mean, we want this to work. There's nobody that you look up here who wants to wash their hands with the situation. We are confronting in many cases, I don't like to use kind of crazy terms, but an existential crisis in California with homelessness. And there are communities that are stepping up and there's communities that aren't, but they're being forced to. And you all bear the impacts, and so I think the big key, Tamara, is the commitment is whether it's continued webinars and other work like this with these conversations, or once again, if we need to come have a walk in your area, whether you have the emails with the temporary shelters that goes and we're responding. The goal for all of us is that this isn't just about one person saying something or to another. It's that the system actually does well. And for, if you or others in the neighborhood would like to maybe see some of the other facilities that have gone up that we have had success with or difficulty with, that honest conversation is the only way that we can move forward with you. So I just want to thank you for that.
I'd add on, because I always like to at least put in a message of hope in this. And Paul talked about the reduction in the point in time count numbers, which is a testament to things that are working. And just to give you a couple of examples, just this month, starting the 1st of May, and it'll continue through mid-June, they're placing 12 people per day at a new permanent supportive housing site in Petaluma. And some of our folks have gone there. And then we're also, and you can see that from Highway 101. It's the north end of Petaluma. It's a Project Home Key site that the county partnered with the city on. And again, that is housing people who are some of our most vulnerable, chronically homeless individuals, including some who once resided at the tents. And then at the same time, here at the end of next month, Caritas Homes, which is right next to Highway 101 and kind of around the Macy's at the big Catholic Charities site, that will open 30 beds of the most chronically homeless with behavioral health needs. And they'll be wrapped around with services from our behavioral health care providers. So you're seeing a backlog at the system start to break up by adding in these new housing units. And again, we'll see some of our clients placed there, and that's going to be their permanent home. And all of this is progress, and I hope folks don't see it. Do see it. It doesn't happen all at once. It's happening methodically, and it's happening with a lot of effort.
One question was just posted on Facebook by Wendy. She asks, why can't we use the Sonoma Developmental site, I guess, for a shelter site? There's plenty of room for housing and services there.
I'll just state that, the Sonoma Development, that's a really big open-ended question. The Sonoma Developmental Center has had a full reboot. It's a state-owned property. It is not a county-owned facility. We definitely have worked with the community to design what is the future use. Part of that future use could be things like this, and also housing for developmentally disabled individuals and others. And that's definitely something but that is in it's being, like many sites, that is actually going through the state to a vendor to build it out, to have proposals. And we're in a situation right now where I will just say, as any county-owned facility that you look at, whether it's Los Guilacos out in Sonoma Valley, this site here, we reviewed and approved if we need to go into the Veteran Center. Multiple other sites that we actually own and control are being utilized just as is in the cities. So big question. Simple answer is that, that something could develop, but that's in a long renewal, and the facilities themselves are broken down. That was one of the things actually when Sinead was really discussed, is there was a lot of folks who wanted us suggested that we move folks into Sinead off of the streets, and said, there's no way that we can move people into a structure that has been deemed unsafe from a seismic aspect, that a hospital is moving out. And then there would be folks who say, yeah, but it's better than the streets. And I'd say, yeah, but we are a government. We have legal requirements and permitting requirements. Anytime we get involved, we're actually the most regulated entity in the world by government itself. So if we get involved, the progress can't go from from a 1 to a 3. It has to go from a 1 to a 8, 9, 10. And that's just kind of the reality we live with.
So Paul, want to make sure that you say one more time how people can get in touch with you to make sure they're on our mailing list. I think we need to have more of these type of conversations. As I said, I'll try and get Santa Rosa more involved in the next one as well. But can you give that contact information out?
Yeah, the best way to reach us and to join, make sure you're on our email list, is to email us at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. That's public affairs, one word, at sonoma-county.org. That's the best way, and we'll get you on that email list, so we'll make sure you are notified of any future forums like this. So I think we've gone through everything. We're nearing the top of the hour now. We have a lot of thank yous from those in our viewers who are appreciative of the time here. And I think we're hearing a desire for more of these. And I think we will certainly help reach out to the Santa Rosa Police and see if we can get a representative for them from the PD to join us next time. So, Supervisor Gore, any final thoughts?
Yeah,
Supervisor Coursey?
I want to thank as much as the staff and everybody and all the craziness that's going on. I mean, we are, those of us who are on the call, we're practitioners. This is our job to do this and to do this right, to lean in on policy, operation, accountability, and all the others. So the request is to continue to engage and ensure that if you see something, say something, write us. But also, I hope you'll take into context or take into mind the context of the situation, that this is not a locked camp for folks who have their rights taken away from us. While some people say, some have brought up questions about, should you really be screening people before they come in, and others. I mean, we have to manage safety of the site. So we're in a crazy place of doing that while honoring people's freedom. But at the same time, those of you in the neighborhoods, and Tamara, I just really stick on your comment, which is, work with us to work through this so this is a success in our neighborhood and others. And that's the goal. So if we're not achieving that goal, keep bringing it. That's why we're here. I appreciate accountability. So, Paul, I'll just say that, we're going to end this webinar, and I want to thank everybody for joining, especially Julie, our Spanish interpreter, and Chris and Jennifer, our ASL interpreters. And I'd like to remind everyone that this and all the other previous recordings are available on our Homeless Services Division webpage. So you can access this information if you're late to the conversation. But whether we continue with webinars or direct communications, just make sure your voice is heard, and we'll keep reaching out to you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.